My name is Caroline Gorski, and I'm the Group Director for R² Data Labs, which is Rolls-Royce's Advanced Data Analytics and Artificial Intelligence unit. Thank you ever so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here to talk about some work we've been doing in R² Data Labs for Rolls-Royce, but also more broadly for the wider populations around thinking about trustworthiness for AI algorithms, particularly when you're thinking about deploying them in either mission critical, safety critical, or industrial settings. Back in December of last year in 2020, we released to the public domain on an open source basis our work that we've entitled the Aletheia Framework, in which you can see here featured on the Rolls-Royce.com website. Alethia is the output of more than 2 years' work from my team and other groups across Rolls-Royce, thinking about the question of how we can assure that artificial intelligences, when deployed in particularly safety critical industrial settings like those that Rolls-Royce works in, can be trusted, that they are both trustworthy and that they fit within an appropriate ethical framework. That Alethia framework released last year is obviously now available to all. It's been built over those 2 years of development and has been constructed on over a decade of experience deploying and operating artificial intelligences in our engine health monitoring systems. And those are ensuring that safety critical products, engines in operation on aircraft all around the world are able to be maintained effectively and using predictive and self-learning algorithms to continuously monitor and respond to events in near real time. Rolls-Royce is one of the world's leading industrial technology companies, and we've been applying advanced analytics for more than 30 years and using artificial intelligence to disrupt the market with our real-time engine health monitoring systems since 1999. The Aletheia framework itself was developed during work around an internal use case, an internal assurance challenge where robotic inspections were proposed for the inspections of some critical components. During our peer review process over the 18 months across 2020 and 2019, it became apparent that both the ethical framework around that decision-making, as well as the trustworthiness process we needed to assure that those decisions could be trusted were new, and in fact had the potential to be applied across multiple different industrial and technical settings for artificial intelligence. By publishing this work openly and freely for reuse, we are hoping to demonstrate to organizations who face similar safety critical operating contexts, but also organizations from other domains, particularly in regulated industries, how they can construct and adopt artificial intelligence ethical frameworks for the use of AI, and how those frameworks can be used to generate artificial intelligences in which people can truly trust. The Aletheia framework is made up of 2 elements. First is an AI ethics framework, which is a method that any organization can use to ensure that the decisions it takes to use AI in critical and non-critical applications are actually ethical. This is the first time AI ethics for industrial contexts has moved beyond theory and into practical application. Secondly, within that framework, there is the very first step-by-step process for ensuring that the outcomes of an AI can be trusted. This 5-layer checking system focuses on the outputs of algorithms and not the algorithms themselves, because they are constantly changing. The checking system prevents biases from developing in algorithms, or at least prevents them from developing in those algorithms in an undetected state. And with those results being constantly monitored, it ensures that those algorithms are trustworthy. The ethics framework and its trust processes have been peer reviewed by subject matter experts in several big tech firms, as well as experts in the automotive, pharmaceutical, academic, and government sectors. We want, by publishing the framework, to really move the AI ethics conversation forward towards discussing concepts and guidelines and accelerating the process of being able to apply artificial intelligence ethically to these kinds of settings. We believe that there is no practical reason why trust in AI can't be created right now, and that it's only with the acceptance and the permission of our society, based on that trust, that the full benefits of artificial intelligence can be realized. and that AI can take its place in our lives alongside us as a partner, supporting us with our lives and work. Rolls-Royce's AI capabilities are embedded deeply in other companies' products and services, and so aren't necessarily widely known. Rolls-Royce's AI doesn't often feature in a consumer's understanding of how the digital world is changing their lives. One of the challenges we face right now is that the current debate around the use of AI is focused majoritatively on the consumer and the treatment of consumer and personal data. And whilst this is extremely important, we believe that what we have created that deals with a challenge rooted squarely in the industrial application of AI will help not only with the application of AI in other industries like ours, but also far more widely. I would like to draw some attention to the debate around AI ethics, which I don't think has necessarily received adequate attention in the conversation to date, specifically with regards to the responsibility of organizations to validate the safety and trustworthiness of the technologies that they adopt and the assurance processes they put in place to demonstrate the trustworthiness to their customers and where relevant, to their regulators. So far, the debate around AI ethics has really essentially hinged on questions of fairness. The debate is concerned with whether there are differential outcomes from the application of algorithms in reference to human beings that are reinforcing prejudicial or biased positions that are inherent in the status quo, or which emerge from bias encoded into the algorithm by its developers. This is why so much of the conversation is taken up with questions of transparency, explainability, and bias. These are all very important questions, but they are not the only important questions. We need to add voices to this conversation that can talk with significant experience about trustworthiness and safety in the context of the ethical adoption of new technologies. Trustworthiness speaks to the ability of developers of an AI system to offer assurances that their algorithm behaves as it should throughout its life, that it doesn't suffer from algorithmic drift as a result of self-learning cycles mutating away from known outcome expectations. But importantly, assuring trustworthiness doesn't necessarily guarantee fairness. You can have a reliable, nefarious AI, just as you can have a reliable, benign AI. Safety asks ethical questions about how the outcomes of any AI system might negatively impact on the physical well-being of people or of the planet, and arguably should extend beyond questions of psychological, political, and democratic and economic safety, as well as individual safety. And as a result, this ethical issue affects YouTube just as much as it affects Tesla. In publishing the Aletheia Framework, Rolls-Royce seeks to move rapidly towards a more practical and applied phase of ethical AI deployment and the management of risks in those deployments. We believe that the safety-critical industrial sector has a significant contribution to make in sharing its experience of operating at the cutting edge of technologies that can have a direct and profound impact on safety, and for which trustworthiness and risk mitigation are therefore paramount. We would like to see a broader range of voices participating in the conversation, particularly around AI ethics, but also more broadly in terms of technological risk in general. Thank you ever so much for listening to me. I'm going to close this session now by showing you the internal case study that kicked the whole process off. If any of you would like to find out any more, please do ask questions right now, or alternatively, you can see the Aletheia Framework and indeed download it from the Rolls-Royce.com website. So thank you again.
So our application of AI is the automated visual inspection of single crystal nickel turbine blades. The current process is entirely manual. It's an extraordinarily difficult task. It's done in controlled light conditions. The inspectors use a magnifier and they're looking for very, very small findings, often of the order of 1 millimeter or 2. The main benefit for us as a company through using AI in visual inspection is a clear productivity improvement, being able to inspect more components consistently with the given population of inspectors that we've got. What it means for the inspectors is the ability to use their hard-earned, hard-won knowledge in a much more productive manner. The automated system taking out components that they don't need to look at, allowing them to focus on those more complex, much more sophisticated problems. The Aletheia Framework contains within it a series of checks and balances that assure us that the output from an AI model is trustworthy. And similarly, it also contains checks and balances that require us to engage with employee representatives, such as the union, to make sure that we fully mitigate the deployment of this technology. And quite understandably, there is nervousness around automated processes. So the framework allows us to work our way through those issues with the union to make sure that we retain people within the business, we give them other opportunities outside of that area, and we retain those skills within the company. The Aletheia Framework allows us to adopt and deploy AI in a trustworthy manner, assuring us that it's safe and appropriate for use. That will make us a more agile, responsive and sustainable business, and it will also improve working conditions and job opportunities for our inspectors.
Thank you ever so much, everybody. If you're interested in finding out more about the Aletheia Framework, you can download it. You can see here from the Rolls-Royce.com website. If you just go to www.rolls-royce.com and search for Alethia, A-L-E-T-H-E-I-A, you'll find it there. We'd be very keen to hear your feedback and understand how you think the framework might be improved. It's very much a version 1.0 right now, and we're hoping that in broadening the conversation, we'll be able to do a lot more towards helping artificial intelligences to be deployed in a trustworthy manner for all manner of use cases, including those of the industrial sector that we operate in. So thank you very much indeed.
So, Carol, that's amazing, Caroline. Thanks so much for joining us today. I've got two questions, and then we'll pick up some questions from the chat. Why did Rolls-Royce make their AI framework open? And then what are you going to do with it next?
Right. Okay. So the honest truth about why Rolls-Royce made its AI Trustworthiness framework open is that we started this whole journey 2 years ago. And we started looking at an internal use case, which is that example that James gave you in the video, that idea about visual inspections. And we knew we'd been working in developing trustworthy AIs for a while, for about 10 years. And so we thought, do you know what, let's write down what we've done and let's turn it into a framework. And then the best thing to do is to go out and test this with everybody else who must already have a better framework that they've been developing for years. And we can share what we've done, and then they can tell us what they've done, and we'll be in a better place by doing that. So we went through this 18-month peer review period, and we talked to academic institutions, and we talked to technology companies, we talked to other safety critical businesses, and all with an intention of saying, look, here's what we've built, show us what you've built, and collectively we can make a better thing. And what actually happened was, in every single conversation, pretty much every single conversation, they turned around and said, nobody has built this yet. What you've built doesn't exist yet. We haven't got one to show you because we haven't built it yet. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the issues. We've got an awful lot of really strong philosophical thinking, legal thinking, sort of context and sort of issue thinking, but nobody's turned it into a procedurized framework that you can actually use in a manufacturing context like ours, and particularly not in a safety critical context like ours. So given that nobody else had done it yet, I genuinely went back into my CEO and said, we can't keep this to ourselves, it's too important. If it doesn't already exist, then it's got to be in the outside world. And Warren, bless him, comes from ARM, which is a business built on open source, built on being in the open, built on, having powerful integrated ecosystems that share. And so that, he was completely, he totally endorsed that. He completely saw the importance of that. And so we published it because it's too important to keep to ourselves. Some things are just too important to hide under the skirts of commercial narrow-mindedness, and Rolls-Royce doesn't behave that way.
Yeah, fantastic. And it sort of plays into everything ODI Leads is about, is doing things rather than talking about and discussing things. So that's amazing. And what do you think is going to happen next with it?
Genuinely, I don't know, but that's really exciting. So part of the point of being at the beginning of a conversation and wanting to publish openly in order to trigger that conversation is that the future is then really open to possibility. We're having a conversation, for example, with UNESCO about their approaches to global data ethics programs and how the Aletheia Framework might contribute to that. That's a brilliant conversation, but we would never have imagined that was where we were going with it. We're having a wonderful conversation with a group of international oncologists who are trying to think about how you might develop a version of the Aletheia Framework for validating the AIs that are used in mapping radiation treatment for cancer is done safely in a trustworthy way that's ethical. And again, that's not a conversation. If we'd started this from a kind of closed aerospace and defense or even high value manufacturing conversation perspective, we wouldn't have got there either. So I think the answer to the question, where is it going, is I have absolutely no idea, but I do know that the need for trustworthy mechanisms, particularly in safety critical deployments of artificial intelligence, is incredibly important. And anything that Rolls-Royce can do to help support those conversations and offer kind of starter yeast, if you like, into the process of growing that capability, I think is a worthwhile and important thing to do.
Fantastic. There's a last question in the chat, which is about, is the framework aimed at developers or managers or QA people or all of the above, or many, many more people?
All of the above, really. So it has inside it, there's 5 technical trustworthiness checks, which are more focused around the AI developer community, in that they explain a set of trustworthiness principles that you can use to be able to validate that your artificial intelligence isn't suffering from algorithmic drift across its life. It doesn't require you to open the black box, but it does allow you to validate that your AI is behaving as you would expect it to behave as a developer. So those 5 checks that are baked right into the middle probably are somewhat more oriented towards AI developers and the managers of AI developers. But in its entirety, because it's an ethics and trustworthiness framework, the ethical parts of it would apply at any place in an organization, any kind of decision maker who is thinking about deploying an AI and wondering whether it will have an ethical impact. And if it does, how you should manage that, how you should account for that, how you should ensure that that impact is within what you consider to be ethically acceptable, that the framework can work for anyone kind of facing those kinds of questions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's been a fantastic talk, and it's really, I think it's going to be interesting to see where you go next. And I'm really excited to find out what happens.
Yeah, totally. And anyone who's got a space that they're working in that has that quality of being safety critical and wants to talk to us about how Alethia might help, please just reach out. We're very happy to help broker those conversations in the network that we're building. Hopefully we'll get a bit more mature around it over the rest of this year.
Thanks, Caroline.